World Bank experts say sub-Saharan Africa needs to create 11 million new jobs each year just to keep up with young people entering the workforce. While the region has seen rapid economic growth, experts worry it will not be enough to employ all the people who want to work. Here is VOA's Mariama Diallo with the conclusion of our special report on unemployment in Africa.
Half of sub-Saharan Africa's population is under 25 years old, and the World Bank says each year in the next decade, there will be many hundreds of thousands more 15-year-olds than the year before. Louise Fox is the co-author of a recent bank report on youth employment.
The jobs of the future for Africa are going to still be in the informal sector, because while formal sector jobs are growing, they're simply not growing fast enough to absorb the 500,000 youth that are 15-year-olds that are coming in every year. And so our message is that governments need a strategy for youth in agriculture to enter, get land, get capital, make money. In household enterprises, that's self-employment, to enter, get capital, and make money.
But getting capital in Africa has been a major problem for young entrepreneurs like Simbarash Muhungu, who started an agricultural processing company in Zimbabwe.
I could not get financing because I did not have any titled land or a house that could cover the collateral that the bank wanted.
Plus, interest rates would have been extremely high.
They're going to give me only 3 months financing, and yet I needed 9 to 12 months financing in order to fund my working capital cycle. Okay, and even if they were going to give me the money, they were going to give me at 25 to 30%.
Lack of financing is not the only constraint on youth employment. Fox says there are obstacles in every sector which go beyond the major cities.
It's in agriculture, it's in the household enterprises, it's in the small towns, it's in the rural areas, it's in the secondary cities, because that's where Africans live, and that's where Africans work today, and that's where the young of Africa are going to work tomorrow.
Some say unrealistic expectations by African youth is another problem. Kenya's central bank president, Nguna Ndungu.
I grew up in coffee banana zone, so I knew the kind of labor peaks that were required for coffee. And the youth had to do this. Today, I don't see any youth doing that.
Progress will depend on action in 2 key areas, says European Union Commissioner for Development, Andres Pielbaum.
But I think without massive investment in infrastructure in Africa, it's difficult for me to imagine that the continent could develop. And second, it is a cooperation between African countries, definitely, to create bigger regional markets, bigger trade inside the continent.
Experts say there is no magic solution. Policymakers will need to address the issues in all its multiple facets. In Washington, Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
Well, joining us now to talk more about Africa's youth employment is Mariama Diallo. Mariama, welcome. And
thank you. It looks like you and I are inseparable recently.
Exactly.
We did Straight Talk yesterday. Now we're doing
here we
Africa
are.
54.
And fantastic job.
Thank you. You too.
Yesterday's piece actually focused so much on education and training in Africa. And I thought it was really appropriate that it mentions that while kids are going to school, but there's a lack of kind of education that can help them get employment.
Yes, and I think what the report was talking about is the quality of education. It's just, when I moved to the U.S., when I started going to university here, beside the language barrier, which was English, and I was from French, sometimes I thought I was the brightest kid in my classes, because things seemed like it was, I had a good base before coming in, a good education in Senegal. But when I look at a report like this that says second graders and third graders cannot recognize a word in a paragraph, I mean, it is absolutely shocking.
And this is because in some cases, actually, the teachers themselves are not well trained. Sometimes they're not the best that get into education. Sometimes people go there just as a way of a fallback because you couldn't find anything better to do in life. Today's piece, you talk about investing in areas like agriculture for people to get jobs there. But is it that simple from what the experts are saying?
I mean, it is absolutely not simple, because I think you and I were talking. I mean, we bought from Africa and we know the realities of land ownership, which is a huge issue. With all that said, it's still, young people need to have access to land. They cannot just become,
And to have access to that land, you have to buy the land with loans given by banks that are not willing to give you any loans because you have no collateral.
Speaking of loans, and that's another thing, it's like what people don't understand is that the government cannot create all the jobs. And I think the Republicans are going to be with me on this. You need to encourage the private sector. You need to encourage other sectors like agriculture and access to finances. Because if people can't find jobs in the government, they're entrepreneurial. They want to create jobs. And the guy that we saw, the Zimbabwean, who used to live in the U.S., who went back, decided he wanted to go back to Zimbabwe and start his own business. That's one of the obstacles that he found, which was, the bank can lend you money, but you have tons of papers,
First they want you to pay back so soon, and then they're charging interest rates of up to 25%.
I mean, 25-30%, that's just staggering.
I'm thinking about something else here in terms of the government recognizing that, for example, land is a sector that could absorb so many of these young fellows, but that means that the attitude towards this land has to change.
Absolutely.
Government has to invest in that sector.
Absolutely, and that's a whole land reform. Certain countries are doing it. I'm not sure about you in Kenya, but other places are doing it because that's the base. Like, you cannot just come in.
I think you have to move away from subsistence agricultural farming to real commercial.
That's another thing. A lot of people have these small lands that they've been working on. They can subsist. They can maybe feed the village or they can feed their homes. But you have to take it to the next level. You have to be able to produce. You have like programs like the AGOA in the United States, which allows you to export and be able to take advantage of like a tax-free. But the farmers cannot export enough because they don't have the resources. I mean, they haven't taken it to the next level, and they need the help from the government.
Yeah, and of course, there's a lot of land lying fallow just because nobody is able to develop this. Hey, Mariama, this looks like it calls for even a bigger
Absolutely, and I think maybe we'll take it to Straight Talk Africa since we have an hour.
We'll keep it right here.
We're going to Straight Talk. I'm just kidding. This is going to be a battle between West and East now.
I know. Thank you.
Thanks
for
very
much for that piece. Those pieces. Now, that's Mariama Diallo, of course, joining us today live on Africa 54. Thank you very much, Mariama. And now we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com.